So what is Longlegs? Longlegs is when you have a writer-director sit down with Nicolas Cage, watch all of the Buffalo Bill scenes from Silence of the Lambs, and they both look at each other and go, hold my beer. What's up, everybody? Welcome to my review of the newest horror release, Longlegs. And I don't think this is an overstatement whatsoever. Longlegs is easily the most hyped up and speculated about horror release of 2024. And there's not even a close second. This movie has had a brilliant, subdued, minimalist marketing campaign that absolutely needs to be studied and replicated. There has been some massively hyperbolic reactions that have come out over the last number of weeks with early screenings and maybe even a film festival. Can't confirm that or not, but there's been a lot of buzz for this movie for well over a couple of months. And somehow I have managed to stay away from all of it. And I have a lot to say about all of that. I'm going to talk about the movie first, but if you want to hear me go off on something that has been really pissing me off for the last number of years when it comes to early reviews, in the words of Arnold Schwarzenegger,
stick around.
But as far as Longlegs, this is the type of film that you want to walk into as blind as humanly possible. So I'm going to be extremely careful about the amount of details I give in this review. And as far as a plot synopsis, all that I will tell you is really all that I knew walking into it, is that you have Micah Monroe as an FBI investigator hunting down a serial killer that is played by Nicolas Cage. Do you need to be sold any further? So is Longlegs cemented as one of the greatest horror films of the decade? Is it now the greatest horror film of 2024? Is it one of those rare movie releases that actually succeeds at matching the massive amount of hype before its release? Well, really quick before I answer all those questions, while Longlegs is absolutely the villain of this story, the villain of all of our stories is miserable feet. So if you want to have happy feet, check out the sponsor of today's video, Vessi. Summers are known for the heat, sunshine, and all the activity-filled days. And whether you're strolling through the city, going off to a beach escape, or doing an impromptu hike, having the correct pair of shoes for each activity is integral to your enjoyment. Not to mention those dreaded summer showers that love to rain on our parade and soak our favorite pair of shoes all the way through to our feet. And if you've ever thought to yourself, man, I sure wish I had a pair of shoes that was perfect for every one of those activities and kept my feet dry in rain, mud, or puddles. Well, Vessi heard you. Vessi's new Stormburst low tops are designed to be your go-to for any setting or occasion, from city streets to outdoor adventures. The enhanced traction as well as the cushioned midsole make these ideal for mountainous trails, sandy beaches, wet city streets, or even just a little walk in the morning dew. They're also easy on and off with the pull tabs and elastic openings, so you're out the door in a flash. And like all Vessi shoes, they are 100% waterproof. They actually use this knit waterproof technology called Dymatex that is also dual climate. So it keeps your feet cool in the summer and warm in the winter. So no matter what the weather has planned, your plans are never ruined by miserable feet. I've been wearing Vessi shoes for over 2 years now, and at this point, they're the only shoe brand that I even buy. And I have a pair for every single occasion. Something a little more formal, something a little more casual, or even something for my rugged outdoor adventures. And they are the most comfortable, versatile, and reliable shoes that I have ever owned. So if you want shoes that are stylish, versatile, and waterproof, elevate your spontaneous activities with Vessi's Stormburst low top. Discover more at vessi.com/Cody Leach, and if you buy your pair today, you'll get an automatic 15% off of your first purchase at checkout. So get ready to stay cool and dry, and thank you to Vessi for sponsoring today's video. So kicking off the positives of Longlegs, what I appreciated the most about this movie is that it is very much an intentional callback to one of my favorite eras of filmmaking, and that is 90s crime thrillers, 90s serial killer movies. You think of things like Seven and Silence of the Lambs and The Bone Collector and Kiss the Girls. Like, there was an era in the 90s where we got a lot of those types of movies, and we don't get too many of them anymore. And Longlegs does a really great job at recreating some of the approach and the vibe of movies like that, while at the same time kind of using that against you. Like, it gets you set into this little bit of comfort that you know where things are going to go. You're like, okay, this is giving me vibes of some movies I've seen before, and I'm comfortable now. I know what to expect. I know what type of ride I'm in for. and then it pulls the rug out from under you and sends you in a completely different direction. And that's a really refreshing experience to have, because we are in an era where filmmaking has been going on for so long that a very justifiable argument that we hear a lot nowadays is that there's not too many original ideas. And while I would say there's plenty of original movies released that a lot of people ignore, there's a validity to saying that a lot of movies feel reminiscent of other things. They're very heavily inspired by other things. They are, going along the same veins of other movies that we know and love. And when you have a movie that can effectively give you a little bit of that nostalgia, just enough to give you the warm and fuzzies and make you remember a time, a certain type of filmmaking that you miss, while at the same time using that against you, that's a really cool experience. And one of the biggest achievements by the director, as well as the director of photography here, is that the way that this movie is shot, it's using really wide-angle lenses. There's a lot of still camera. There's these really intentionally slow, drawn-out zooms. And what that does, and I noticed this about 10 minutes in, and I couldn't stop experiencing this, is that no matter what the subject of the shot is, no matter what the focus is in the foreground, it gives you such a feeling of discomfort and uneasiness that your eyes are constantly darting around to all of the void space in the shot. You have Micah Monroe, or you have Longlegs, or you have somebody that's the center of the shot, and you can't help but look everywhere else because you just feel like something else is going to come out. Like something's going to happen, something is lurking in the shadows. And that is from frame 1 to the credits. Like, think of the emotional reaction that your body has when you have a really effective jump scare, where you're watching a film and suddenly the sound design cuts out and the score gets quiet and the movie starts to creep a little bit and there's a lot of void space and you start to kind of grip your chair a little bit and you just know that anticipation is coming. You're like, something's gonna fucking jump out. Something's happening. These are the signs. I know it's happening. Just fucking do it. When's it coming? When's it coming? Now imagine that you never really get the release of the jump scare. You're just stuck waiting for something to happen. That's the way this movie makes you feel throughout the majority of the runtime. And I want to make an important distinction here. I do not consider this to be like one of the scariest movies of the decade. But we all have different definitions and criteria for what we consider to be scary. Some people it's jump scares, some people it's atmosphere, some people it's the plot, some people it's kills and gore. And what I would say about this film is that it's not necessarily what I would call scary, but it's very uncomfortable. It's very uneasy. It is very much dripping with this sense of dread that never really lets up. And I think that's the proper expectation to have with this film. If you walk in expecting this to be the scariest experience you've had in the last decade, I think the vast majority of you are going to be highly disappointed. But if you walk in just expecting a movie that is going to really twist your level of comfort, I think you'll walk in and really have a good experience with it. Also, a quick fun fact. Did you know that the director of this movie is actually the son of Anthony Perkins, Norman Bates himself? Now you do. Moving on from that, the two lead performances here are damn good. You've got Micah Monroe, who I have really been a fan of and just really enjoyed all of the projects that she has picked, from The Guest to It Follows to Watcher. And she gives a very unique performance in this movie, especially just unique from what we typically see from her. Her character is very detached and very at arm's distance from all the other characters, as well as you as the audience member. She's very quiet and stoic. And while that might turn some people off, they might not really appreciate her being kind of this very subdued character, I found it to be a really interesting performance, because from her facial expressions to her mannerisms, whether she's standing or walking, to the dialect that she chooses, she really crafted a character. And it was just interesting to see how much went into creating such a minimalist character and all of the different elements it takes to bring that character to life. And then of course you have Nick Cage, which to me was the big selling point of this movie and will be for a lot of people. You could just market this film as Nick Cage plays a serial killer. I mean, you could market every Nicolas Cage movie off of that and you're gonna get more asses in seats than you probably realize. I mean, how many people went to go see Renfield because it was Nick Cage plays Dracula? It's just the way that it is. Nick Cage is one of those actors that whenever he gets assigned a different type of role, you just start to imagine what a Nick Cage version of that is, and you have to fucking see it. And for all of the zany, over-the-top Nick Cage performances that we have had throughout his career, this is easily the most twisted thing that I've ever seen him do. He is visually terrifying, and there are certain aspects to what he does, from his dialect to his facial expressions, and especially the makeup design. I mean, just the way that Nicolas Cage embodies the character of Longlegs, you're either going to love or you're going to hate it, and I think that's perfect. I mean, that kind of just embodies what a Nicolas Cage performance is all of the time. For some people, it's going to be way too much. For others, it's going to be like, oh my God, I did not know I needed this, but God, I'm glad I have it. From the very first moment that you see just part of what Longlegs looks like and what Nick Cage is doing with this character in the opening scene, you're hooked. Your ass is permanently glued to that seat until the credits roll. I mean, it's one of those types of performances that you have to see. Something else that I really appreciated about this movie that was done so subtly, but is something that I really wish more horror films would do, is that this sets itself in the 90s, but it doesn't like outright tell you that. It doesn't advertise it. It doesn't have like 1993 as a big text drop on the movie. There's not like pop culture references throughout. Like, at most, the only clue that you have of the time period this is set in is the look of the film, shooting it on, I believe, 35 millimeter, and also that there's a scene inside of the FBI office where they have Bill Clinton as the commander-in-chief just in the background, and you can blink and miss it. But what I love about that is not only does it really recreate that vibe of those 90s movies that this is very heavily influenced by and it's paying homage to, but it also gets rid of a lot of the modern problems with horror films and with crime films, where technology is so rampant nowadays with cell phones and CCTV and everything that it kind of takes away a lot of the angst. It takes away a lot of the tension because things would get solved a lot more easily. There'd be way more resources. This takes it back to a simpler time where you have to do legwork and you have to have actual brains and you have to solve ciphers and you have to go with your hunches. And I just love that type of movie. So I'm so glad we have a film that can go back to that era and not make a giant deal of it. Just brings you back and tells a story. And my final positive is that while I'm not going to describe too much what this movie does, for the majority of the film, it is very grounded and it is very based in reality, but there's these small elements that start to show their head in the back half, especially in the last act of the film, that lean a little bit into supernatural and otherworldliness, and it's very satanic in nature. And where a lot of movies making that type of leap, it feels like it would jump the shark, it feels like it would kind of break the reality that is built in the film. In here, because you bathe in such a disturbing type of satanic, ritualistic, serial killer vibe, it really feels like a natural progression towards the end of the film, and it makes it stand out amongst things that are very grounded in reality, like Silence of the Lambs and Seven. So there's elements in here that I think make this movie stand out that are really interesting, and it's, again, going to be something that might turn off some people, but for me, I appreciated the unique direction that it takes by the end. Now moving on to the mixed aspects, and this is the type of film that you don't walk out feeling like you completely understand everything. There are certain things that I think are going to be answered better with a second or a third watch. I think there are certain things that are just intentionally left unanswered and ambiguous, and it's something that I need to watch the film again and sit on it for a while before I really know how I fully feel about that, because I'm somebody, I don't need everything spelled out, but I do have enough built-in frustration with wanting answers that sometimes it can affect my experience. I had this last year with Talk to Me, which ended up being my favorite horror film of the year, where I walked out of the first screening, there was a number of things I didn't quite understand, there was a number of things that I felt like were intentionally unanswered. I needed to watch the movie and kind of sit on it and discuss it with some friends, and eventually landed on really enjoying those aspects. Time will tell how I land on Longlegs, but if you're like me and ambiguity is a slippery slope, sometimes you appreciate it, sometimes it can frustrate you. This is a movie that intentionally is going to leave you a little disoriented and a little unsure of all of the answers, and that's going to divide people. And now moving on to the negatives. Despite the fact that I was so positive on Nicolas Cage, and I was so sold on that, and I do think that is going to be the element of this movie that most people are going to be talking about, both positive and negative. There were two moments for me where I felt like Nick Cage turned it up a little bit too much. I feel like this character, for my own personal taste, was the most disturbing and the most effective and was the most just insane to watch when he was dialing it back a bit. Whenever he was a little more subdued and a little bit more minimalist. And it's kind of, even the visuals, when you see Longlegs and it's kind of obscured, or he's in the background, or there's a frame where the shot literally cuts off at his jaw and you don't see everything from here up. That's when the character was most effective for me. The two scenes where Cage turns it up to full 11 with the Cageisms, some people are going to love it. Some people are going to get a really welcome laugh for such a dark, heavy movie. For me, I was like, ooh, I wish he had dialed that back to about 8. And the other negative that I have, which kind of goes along with my mixed, it might go one way or the other on a rewatch, is that I felt like the buildup, the intrigue, the mystery itself was more satisfying than some of the answers that we were given. We're given a lot of our answers very quickly and in large doses in the last 15 minutes of this film, so it's kind of hard to pause and wrap your mind around a lot of it. But there are also some things that I very easily grasped what the answers to some of these questions were, and what I was building up in my head and all the questions that I was asking throughout the movie were a little more satisfying than the answers that I was given. So I have seen, just so far on my out of theater reaction, most people's negative reactions to this film focus on the ending, so I don't think I'm going to be alone in that, but it is a movie that I think succeeds more with its build-up than with its payoff. Now, with all that being said, that's pretty much all the thoughts that I have on Longlegs at this moment. I want to talk a little bit about expectations and about early reviews and how those affect everybody's expectations. So I've been doing this critic YouTube game for well over 7 years at this point. And over the last couple of years, I've had a lot more experiences going to film festivals, going to movies premieres, going to press screenings. Not very many because, geographically, I'm just not in an area of the country that gets a lot of that. I have a 4-hour drive minimum to go to some of these. But I've experienced some of it. And what I've noticed, and has grown increasingly infuriating for me over the last couple of years, is that a lot of the regular critics and reviewers that get to go to a lot of these early premieres and Hollywood premieres and film festivals wildly overblow their early reviews. And while there are some people, I legitimately believe that was their experience, sometimes going to a premiere, going to a festival, meeting the stars, being 10 feet away from Nicolas Cage watching his new movie, there's a certain amount of coolness and excitement that will affect and will kind of inflate your experience with the film. And that's legit. That's their experience. That's fair. However, I know for a fact that there's a number of people, and they are regular offenders, that go to see these movies early, and they intentionally overblow their reactions with giant hyperbolic words and these larger-than-life statements, specifically because they want to stay in the good graces of these studios and continue to get invited to these things, as well as wanting to get pull quoted either in Twitter posts or trailers or the poster to get more clicks, more eyes, more attention on their work. And I find that to be so fucking infuriatingly disingenuous that I detest it completely, and I call it out every single time that I see it. And I knew walking into this film that Longlegs was going to be the example of 2024 of this type of bullshit. I managed to stay away from all of it. I did not look at any posts. Every time I saw even half of the word Longlegs, I would keep scrolling. I was able to walk into this film with as little to no expectation as possible, and I know for a fact that helped my movie experience. But many of you have seen all of the early reactions over the last number of weeks. Scariest movie of the decade. Most disturbing movie ever. Every frame of this movie is nightmare fuel. I mean, all of these huge, hyperbolic, buzzword-heavy, catchy little phrases that are meant to be stuck on the poster to advertise the film that are in no way indicative of this person's actual honest experience with the movie. And here are the two things that I want all of you to take away from this. Number one, for all of you general audience members, people that just view my channel, people that watch other channels, people that like following people on Twitter to get these early reactions, try your best, and I know it's fucking difficult, but try your best to put absolutely zero stock in early reviews. Not saying that all of them are bullshit, but a lot of them are bullshit. And how many times a year do we have a situation where there's early buzz for a movie and then everybody else goes to see it and says the critics were full of shit? Well, the critics weren't full of shit, but the people that saw it early that told you this was the greatest thing they've ever seen in their life, they were full of shit. So try to find people that you trust. Not saying it needs to be me. If you don't trust me, totally fair. But find people that you trust, that you are pretty confident don't do that type of shit. And only put stock in those. Don't put stock in the others that continuously steer you wrong. And the other takeaway is for all of the critics and TikTokers and movie reactors that do this type of shit, of which probably none of them are going to see this video, so it's probably gonna fall on deaf ears. But stop doing this shit. It doesn't reflect well on you. After a while, everybody sees through it. It doesn't help the movie at all. In fact, more times than not, it hurts the movie because you create this manufactured disconnect between what critics believe and what the audience members are experiencing. And so you build this amount of distrust that is run rampant at this point. And the number of people whose experience you absolutely decimate with those type of statements is an absolute tragedy. I cannot stand to see the amount of people that are just general movie lovers that go to see a couple movies a year, that put a whole bunch of stock into these ridiculous overblown statements, and they use their 1 out of 4 movie trips of the year to spend their money and their time on something that is set up completely wrong for them, where they walk in expecting the scariest movie of the year when somebody should have just told them, go check this out if you like 90s serial killer movies. Stop promising people the world every fucking week. Stop saying this was the greatest experience you've ever had. It was a religious experience and you just fucking lifted off of the seat for 90 minutes because guess what? You said the same shit last week. And some might say it's unprofessional for me to say that as these people's peer, but you know what? Sometimes you gotta call people out on their bullshit. And I know for a fact that some people do it. I've seen it time and time again. They play the review Mad Libs game, or magically every single movie that they manage to see an early screening of is this wonderful experience. Not one early movie misses for them. And I'm just overseeing it. I'm tired of how bad it makes all of us look. I'm tired of this negative impression that it bleeds over onto critics as a whole. And even more so, I'm tired of how it continues to extrapolate this problem of people staying away from theaters and not going out to support movies because they either hate the movie theater experience for a number of reasons, mostly because assholes on their phone, or because they've had so many disappointing experiences putting hundreds of dollars and spending hours in a theater expecting the greatest thing in the world to walk out of a movie that was okay, or a movie that was just completely different than what they were told that it was. So in conclusion, do not walk into Longlegs expecting your world to get rocked. Do not walk into Longlegs expecting a movie on the level of Seven and Silence of the Lambs, despite me comparing it to that a number of times because of the tone and the approach. Do not walk in expecting the scariest movie of the decade. Block out all of the bullshit that you have heard for the last number of weeks and walk in expecting a really interesting, unnerving, throwback 90s style serial killer movie with a wild Nicolas Cage performance. If those are your two criteria, your two expectations that you walk in with, a lot of you will love this movie. Some of you, it won't quite be your cup of tea, but almost none of you will walk out saying that was absolutely not what I was sold. So overall, guys, I really enjoyed Longlegs. It is one of the better movies of the year for me for sure. I need to see it again and sit on it, but I really enjoyed what I got out of this. I appreciated the throwback nature of it. I liked the way that it made me feel uncomfortable and uneasy the entire time. I really appreciated the vast majority of what Nicolas Cage did. It's a thumbs up from me. I recommend you go and see it if this is the type of movie that you enjoy. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, click over here for all my 2024 new release reviews. I'm also going to put my recent ranking of the X trilogy here that we just got the culmination for. Check out Vessi down in the video description below if you want the best pair of shoes you've ever owned in your life. Like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss everything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.